My husband thinks he can get away with canceling our anniversary vacation for an emergency conference, while I'm left scrolling through social media at home. But what he doesn't know is I've already tracked his location to a beachfront villa in Bali, and I'm boarding a flight tonight to catch him with our family friend Avery, who conveniently had vacation time the same week. The first sign that something was off came in fragments, small inconsistencies that seemed innocent enough. In isolation, Sebastian and I had been married for 8 years, building what I thought was an unshakable foundation. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. We'd weathered career changes, a cross-country move, and the challenges that come with merging two lives into one shared existence. Through it all, he had been my constant, my touchstone, in a world that often felt chaotic and unpredictable. Until now. Sebastian worked as an architectural consultant for an international firm, a job that occasionally required travel but rarely on short notice. We'd spent months planning our anniversary trip to Greece, 10 days of Mediterranean sun, ancient ruins, and reconnection away from the demands of our busy lives. It was more than just a vacation. It was a celebration of us, a reminder of why we'd chosen each other all those years ago. "Kara, I'm so sorry, but there's an emergency with the Singapore project," Sebastian had said 3 days before our scheduled departure, his voice tight with what I'd interpreted as genuine regret. "The client is threatening to pull out entirely if we don't address their concerns immediately. The whole team has to fly out tomorrow for damage control." I'd felt the disappointment like a physical ache. "This is our anniversary trip, Sebastian. We've been planning it for months." I know. I feel terrible," he'd said, taking my hands in his. His eyes, those warm hazel eyes I'd fallen for on our first date, had seemed sincere. "I've already spoken to the travel agent. Everything's fully refundable, and I promise we'll reschedule for next month. The company will even cover the difference in costs as an apology." I had believed him. Of course I had believed him. In 8 years of marriage, Sebastian had never given me reason to doubt his word. He had always been transparent, reliable, the kind of husband my friends envied when they complained about their own partner's shortcomings. Perhaps that's why the discovery hurt all the more when it came. The day after Sebastian left for his emergency conference, I'd been sorting through our shared home office, gathering tax documents we needed, when I noticed his passport was missing from our safe. Strange, I thought, since Singapore had electronic travel authorization for business travelers from our country. No physical passport stamp required for short stays. Sebastian knew this. We'd traveled there together just last year. It was a small detail, easily explained away. Maybe he'd taken it just in case. Maybe the rules had changed. Maybe I was making something out of nothing. But then came the credit card notification, a charge from a high-end resort I didn't recognize. When I looked it up online, my screen filled with images of luxurious beachfront villas in Bali, Indonesia, 7,500 miles from the Singapore office, where my husband was supposedly saving a critical client relationship. My hands had trembled as I sat at our kitchen counter, staring at those images of paradise. A paradise where my husband had gone without me after canceling the trip we'd spent months planning together. Even then, I'd grasped for innocent explanations. Perhaps the company had moved the meeting location. Perhaps there was a legitimate reason he hadn't mentioned the change. Perhaps, until I saw the Instagram story. It appeared briefly on my feed, posted by Avery Williams, our close friend of 6 years, a corporate attorney who had been at our dinner table countless times, who had held my hand at my father's funeral, who had been bridesmaid at my cousin's wedding. Avery, whose caption read, "Paradise Found," above a photo of a sunset cocktail, the distinctive silhouette of Bali's sacred Mount Agung visible in the background, the same luxury resort charged to our credit card. The post disappeared almost immediately, deleted. Within minutes. But not before I'd taken a screenshot. Not before I'd noticed the reflection in her sunglasses. A man's silhouette that I would recognize anywhere after 8 years of marriage. I'd sat motionless at our kitchen counter, the familiar space suddenly feeling foreign around me. The framed photo of Sebastian and me in Santorini from 2 years ago, our practice run for the anniversary trip, he'd joked, seemed to mock me from the wall. The wedding invitation we'd framed, cream cardstock with navy letterpress announcing, "Our union to the world," suddenly felt like a relic from someone else's life. 8 years of trust, shattered by an Instagram reflection and a credit card statement. The shock had given way to a cold, clear fury, unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Not the hot, chaotic anger that makes you scream and throw things, but something far more dangerous. A crystalline resolve that cut through confusion and hurt with surgical precision. Sebastian thought he was clever. He thought he had covered his tracks, manufactured the perfect excuse. He thought I would sit at home, placated by promises of rescheduled celebrations, while he enjoyed Bali's pristine beaches, with a woman who had stood beside me at countless birthday dinners, holiday gatherings, and backyard barbecues. He thought wrong. Within hours, I had confirmed what my heart already knew. Our shared location app showed his phone in Bali, not Singapore. He'd obviously forgotten we'd set it up years ago for travel safety and never turned it off. A quick call to his office under the guise of sending important documents revealed that while there was indeed a Singapore project in trouble, the critical meetings had been handled via video conference. No team had flown out. The final confirmation came from Sebastian's assistant, Eric, who had always been fond of me. One concerned wife-to-assistant call, and his hesitant voice had told me everything. "Kara, I'm really not comfortable getting in the middle of this. I think you should talk to Sebastian directly." I knew then that the deception ran deep. Sebastian hadn't just lied on impulse. He had constructed an elaborate facade, using his genuine work reputation as cover while he escaped to a tropical paradise with Avery, my friend, our friend, all while leaving me behind with a canceled anniversary celebration and empty promises. What Sebastian didn't realize was that in teaching me to trust him completely, he had also taught me exactly how to unravel his deception. 8 years of sharing a life meant I knew his passwords, his habits, his tells when something was amiss. I knew which credit card he used for personal indulgences, which email account received his confirmations, which airline he preferred for long-haul flights. By nightfall, I had booked my own one-way ticket to Bali, scheduled to arrive within 24 hours. I had located their exact villa through the resort booking confirmation in his email. I had even arranged for a private car to take me directly from the airport to the resort where my husband and our so-called friend were currently enjoying their stolen paradise. As I packed my suitcase, efficiently, methodically, the way Sebastian had always admired, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was not how I had imagined spending the week of our 8th anniversary, but perhaps it was fitting. 8 years of building a life together would now culminate in a confrontation that would either end that life or transform it into something entirely new. Either way, I was done being the trusting wife left behind. It was time for Sebastian to face the consequences of his choices, and I would deliver them personally, in Bali. Before Sebastian's betrayal upended everything, our life together had settled into a rhythm that felt both comfortable and purposeful. We had met in graduate school. I was pursuing my master's in educational psychology while Sebastian was finishing his architecture degree. Our first encounter had been at a mutual friend's housewarming party, where Sebastian had impressed me, not with grand gestures but with attentive conversation, genuinely engaging with my research interests when most people's eyes glazed over at the mention of cognitive development theories. Our courtship had been steady, intentional, much like Sebastian himself. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He approached relationships with the same careful planning he applied to his architectural designs. Thoughtful, detail-oriented, building something meant to last. I'd fallen in love with his stability as much as his smile, his reliability as much as his laugh. We married in a ceremony that reflected us both, elegant but unpretentious, in a renovated historic building that Sebastian had helped restore during his first years at the firm. Our vows had emphasized partnership above all. Else, where you go, I will go. Your dreams will be my dreams. Words that now hung in the air like dust motes, visible only when caught in the harsh light of betrayal. Our home in Austin was our shared masterpiece, a mid-century modern we'd renovated together, blending Sebastian's architectural vision with my preference for warmth and comfort. The open-concept main floor featured floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a small but meticulously landscaped backyard. My reading nook occupied one corner of the living room, where morning light streamed in through eastern windows. Sebastian's drafting table stood opposite, where he sometimes brought work home, sketching conceptual designs while I graded papers from my high school psychology students. Weekday mornings followed a comfortable script. Sebastian making coffee while I prepared breakfast, a quick review of our daily schedules, a kiss goodbye that never felt rushed despite our busy lives. Weekends were for farmers markets, home, improvement projects, and dinners with our close circle of friends, including Avery, whose presence in our lives had seemed so natural, so unthreatening. Avery had entered our world 6 years ago when she joined Sebastian's firm as their in-house counsel. She was brilliant, engaging, with a quick wit that enlivened our dinner parties. She lived alone in a downtown condo, occasionally dated but never seemed to find someone who measured up. A comment I had once found flattering, thinking she admired our relationship. Now those words replayed in my mind with sinister undertones. Our friendship with Avery had evolved organically. She joined us for holiday celebrations when she couldn't fly home to Chicago. She helped me plan Sebastian's surprise 35th birthday party, spending hours arranging the perfect architectural-themed details. When my father died unexpectedly 2 years ago, she had organized meals for weeks, ensuring we didn't have to think about cooking while navigating grief. I had trusted her completely. We both had. Our marriage wasn't perfect. No relationship spanning 8 years could be. But we had developed healthy ways of addressing conflict. Sebastian disliked confrontation, preferring to process disagreements through thoughtful discussion, rather than heated arguments. I admired this about him, how he never raised his voice, never slammed doors, never used silence as a weapon. When tensions arose, we talked through them, finding compromises that respected both our needs, or so I had thought. Looking back now, I wondered if his conflict avoidance had been less about healthy communication and more about maintaining a smooth surface, preventing deeper issues from emerging into the light. Had his reasonable tone and logical approaches to our disagreements actually kept us from addressing fundamental problems? Had his calm demeanor concealed growing distance? The Greece trip had been my idea initially, a chance to reconnect after a period when we'd both been consumed by our careers. Sebastian had been working longer hours, taking on a major international project that frequently kept him at the office, past dinner. I had accepted leadership of my school's curriculum development committee, which added evening meetings to my already full teaching schedule. We were passing each other like ships in the night, our conversations reduced to logistical planning and household management. We need time away, I'd told him one rare Sunday morning when we were both home with nowhere to be. Just us, somewhere, beautiful, remembering why we chose each other. Sebastian had agreed readily. Too readily, perhaps? Had he already been looking for ways to appease me, to maintain the appearance of commitment while his attention drifted elsewhere? Had Avery already become more than a friend to him by then? The planning process had seemed to reinvigorate us, both. We'd spent evenings researching Greek islands, debating the merits of Santorini versus Mykonos, adding activities to our shared digital itinerary. Sebastian had even surprised me with Greek language lessons, an app we both downloaded, competing playfully over who could master basic phrases more quickly. Sagapo, he'd practiced one night as we prepared for bed. I love you. Had those words been sincere, even as he was presumably growing closer to Avery? Or had our marriage already been crumbling beneath the weight of his unspoken dissatisfaction? The questions haunted me now, casting shadows over memories I had treasured. Our anniversary had always been sacred, the one day each year when we prioritized our relationship above all else, when we reminded each other why we had chosen this, life together. Previous celebrations had ranged from elaborate, a weekend in wine country, to intimate, stargazing in our backyard with champagne and the playlist from our wedding. This year's trip to Greece was meant to be the most special yet. Our Great Eight, Sebastian had called it, an adventure worthy of 8 years building a life together. The irony wasn't lost on me that instead of walking among ancient ruins, with my husband, I was now sorting through the ruins of our marriage, archaeologist of my own disappointment, brushing away layers of deception to reveal artifacts of betrayal. The night before Sebastian left for his emergency conference, we had shared a quiet dinner at home. I'd been disappointed about the canceled trip, but sympathetic to his work predicament. I'd even packed his suitcase while he finished some pre-trip work calls, carefully folding his dress shirts the way he preferred, including the navy tie I'd given him last Christmas. The intimacy of that act, preparing for his journey, caring for him through the details, now felt like another wound. Had he been on the phone with Avery while I packed? Had they laughed about my obliviousness? I'll make this up to you, Sebastian had promised, kissing me goodbye at our front door. When I get back, we'll reschedule everything. An even better trip. His smile had seemed genuine, his embrace warm and familiar. Nothing in his demeanor had betrayed the elaborate lie he was telling, the parallel plans he had made. The husband I thought I knew would never have been capable of such calculated deception. But then, perhaps I had never really known him at all. Looking back, the warning signs had been there for months, subtle shifts that I'd rationalized away, unwilling to acknowledge the growing distance between us. Sebastian had always been dedicated to his work, but around 6 months ago, his hours at the firm grew longer, his weekend availability more limited. The Singapore project is massive, he'd explain, his eyes bright with ambition. This could be the one that puts us on the map internationally. I'd nodded supportively, proud of his success despite missing our evening walks and Sunday brunches. Then came the changes to his routine, small deviations that seemed innocent in isolation. Sebastian, once predictable to a fault, became slightly less so. He started hitting the gym more frequently, updating his wardrobe with designer pieces he previously would have considered extravagant. When I complimented a new watch that appeared on his wrist, sleeker and more expensive than his usual taste, he'd mentioned something vague about a bonus, changing the subject before I could ask for details. His phone, once casually left on countertops or coffee tables without concern, became a constant companion. He'd take calls in our backyard rather than at the kitchen island where I might overhear. The familiar ping of his message notifications would prompt him to reach for his device with newfound urgency, angling the screen away from my line of sight. Everything. Okay? I'd ask. Just work, he'd reply with that reassuring smile I'd always trusted. You know how clients get when they're nervous about deadlines. I did know. Sebastian had always been the steady, reliable partner who helped others through their crises. It was one of the qualities I most admired about him, his ability to remain calm under pressure, to be everyone's rock, including mine, especially mine. The first truly discordant note came during a dinner party at our home 3 months ago. We had invited 4 couples, including Avery, who arrived alone as usual. Nothing seemed amiss during appetizers and wine on the patio, but I noticed a shift when we moved indoors for the main course. Sebastian and Avery ended up seated next to each other, normal enough given our casual seating arrangement, but there was a new energy between them, a private frequency I couldn't quite tune into. At one point, Sebastian made a comment about a recent architectural exhibition, and Avery finished his sentence perfectly, as though they had previously discussed the topic in depth. Their shared laughter seemed to contain a history I hadn't witnessed. When Sebastian reached for the salt, their hands brushed briefly, perhaps accidentally, perhaps not. "When did you see that exhibition?" I asked lightly, passing the salad. "I thought you were working late that week." A moment's hesitation, barely perceptible. "Oh, I mentioned it to Avery when we were working on the contracting language for Singapore. They had some similar design elements we were considering. It sounded reasonable. It probably was reasonable. But something about the quick glance they exchanged left me feeling suddenly like an outsider in my own dining room." After our guests departed, I helped Sebastian load the dishwasher, the familiar domestic rhythm soothing my unease. "Avery seemed different tonight," I ventured, keeping my tone casual. "More animated than usual." Sebastian arranged wine glasses on the top rack with methodical precision. "Did she? I didn't notice anything different." "You two seem to have a lot to talk about." He glanced at me, his expression mildly puzzled. "We work together every day, Kara. We're bound to have overlapping interests." "Of course," I agreed, pushing away the discomfort. Sebastian had never given me reason to doubt him. I trusted him completely. And Avery had been our friend for years. Our friend, not just his colleague. My unease felt like a betrayal of both relationships. Later that night, I woke to find Sebastian's side of the bed empty. The blue glow of a screen illuminated the hallway outside our bedroom. When I padded quietly to investigate, I found him sitting at the kitchen island, quickly locking his phone. As I entered, "Can't sleep?" I asked, sliding onto the stool beside him. "Just checking some emails from the Hong Kong team," he explained, setting his phone face down on the counter. "They're on the opposite schedule, remember?" I did remember. There was always a logical explanation. Always a reason that made perfect sense. But something had shifted in me that night. A small seed of doubt taking root despite my best efforts to maintain the soil of our marriage inhospitable to such growth. In the weeks that followed, I noticed more discrepancies. Sebastian mentioned a late meeting, but his car was gone from the office parking lot when I drove past after my evening faculty meeting. He talked about lunch with a client downtown, but the receipt that fell from his pocket was from a restaurant in the opposite direction, near Avery's condo. I found myself doing things I'd never imagined. Checking his location on our shared app, scrolling through his call history when he was in the shower, glancing at the passenger seat of his car for signs of another occupant. Each time, I felt ashamed of my suspicion, guilty for doubting the man who had never before given me reason to question his loyalty. And yet, the inconsistencies continued to accumulate. Sebastian began mentioning Avery more frequently in conversation, then abruptly stopped altogether, as though realizing he was creating an unusual pattern. He grew vague about certain workdays, offering generalized summaries rather than the specific details he'd once shared. Our physical intimacy, while never our marriage's defining feature, became less frequent, with Sebastian often claiming exhaustion from work stress. Then came the text, not meant for me, but mistakenly sent to my phone when Sebastian was distracted. "Can't wait for tomorrow. Same place at 7?" He'd grabbed my phone before I could respond, laughing uncomfortably. "Sorry, meant to text Eric about our project review. Your phones look identical in their cases. Our phones were different models, different colors, with distinctly different cases." But I had nodded, swallowing the explanation along with my growing dread. What was there to gain from confronting him with such flimsy evidence? A mistaken text, some schedule inconsistencies, a feeling of distance, hardly grounds for accusation after 8 years of marriage. The Greece trip became my focus, my hope for reconnection. I threw myself into planning the perfect anniversary, celebration, researching boutique hotels overlooking the Aegean, booking a sunset cruise around Santorini, finding the most authentic local restaurants away from tourist centers. If we could just get away from work pressures and daily distractions, we could find our way back to each other. Sebastian seemed genuinely excited as well, bringing home travel books, discussing island hopping options, even suggesting we extend the trip by 3 days to include Athens. His enthusiasm reassured me that whatever distance I'd perceived was merely a product of work stress and routine, nothing that couldn't be remedied by Mediterranean sunsets and reconnection. "This trip is exactly what we need," he told me one evening as we reviewed our itinerary, his arm comfortably around my shoulders. "Just you and me, remembering why we chose each other." I had leaned into his embrace, relief washing over me. My doubts seemed foolish in the face of his warmth, his apparent eagerness to celebrate our anniversary, which made the cancellation, when it came just 3 days before departure, all the more devastating. I wouldn't do this if it weren't absolutely critical, Sebastian had insisted, his expression appropriately regretful as he explained the Singapore emergency. "The client is threatening to walk, and the entire project could collapse. Years of work, millions in revenue. The firm can't lose this one." The story was perfectly crafted to be unassailable. How could I argue with a genuine work crisis? How could I prioritize a vacation, even an anniversary vacation, over Sebastian's career responsibilities? What kind of partner would I be if I made him choose between professional obligation and personal celebration? So I had accepted the cancellation with grace, hiding my disappointment behind understanding smiles, telling myself we would indeed reschedule, make new memories, find another opportunity to reconnect. I had believed him because disbelief was still unthinkable, until it wasn't. I woke the morning after Sebastian's departure feeling oddly hollow. The house, typically comfortable in its familiarity, seemed to echo with absence, not just Sebastian's physical presence, but the absence of certainty I'd always taken for granted in our marriage. I went through my morning routine mechanically, coffee brewing, toast in the small blue ceramic plate Sebastian had brought back from Portugal 3 years ago, the crossword puzzle I usually enjoyed now abandoned after a few half-hearted attempts. My students' essays sat untouched in my tote bag. Grading that I'd planned to complete before our vacation now seemed pointless, my concentration fragmented by unease. The call from our bank was what truly shattered the fragile normalcy I was attempting to maintain. "Mrs. Donovan, this is Francis from Capital Security. We've noticed some potentially unusual activity on your joint credit card and wanted to verify these charges with you." My grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of activity?" "There's a substantial charge from Nirvana Resort in Bali, Indonesia. Given that this is outside your typical spending pattern, our system flagged it for verification." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. "Bali? Are you certain?" "Yes, ma'am. The transaction was processed yesterday. A villa booking at the Nirvana Resort and Spa. The amount is quite significant. Can you confirm this is an authorized charge?" My mouth went dry. "My husband is actually traveling for business in Singapore. Perhaps this is a mistake." A pause on the line. "The charge was made using the physical card, Mrs. Donovan, and verified with the correct PIN. Would you like me to place a hold on the account while we investigate further?" "No," I said quickly, my mind racing. "No, that won't be necessary. I'll speak with my husband. There must be an explanation." After ending the call, I sat motionless at our kitchen island, the familiar space suddenly alien around me. Singapore to Bali was a short flight, less than 3 hours. Was it possible Sebastian had legitimate business in both locations? Perhaps an unexpected client meeting or a detour arranged by his firm? I reached for my phone, my finger hovering over Sebastian's contact. But something stopped me from making the call. If there was an innocent explanation, why hadn't he mentioned Bali? Why construct the elaborate story about the Singapore emergency instead of simply telling me his itinerary had changed? With trembling fingers, I opened our shared location app, a feature we'd enabled years ago for practical purposes when traveling separately. I'd never felt the need to check it before, trusting Sebastian's whereabouts as stated. The map loaded, zooming out to display a blue dot nowhere near Singapore, but instead on the Indonesian island of Bali, exactly where the resort charge had indicated. Still, I clung to alternative explanations. Perhaps the firm had moved the emergency meetings to Bali. Perhaps the Singapore client had a property there. Perhaps. I opened my laptop, searching for the Nirvana Resort. The website displayed spectacular ocean vistas, private infinity pools, romantic dinners on secluded beaches. Your perfect escape, the tagline promised, where paradise meets privacy. This was no business accommodation. This was a luxury couples retreat. My next move felt simultaneously foreign and necessary, accessing Sebastian's email. We had shared passwords early in our marriage, a practice born of practicality rather than suspicion. I had occasionally logged into his account to retrieve flight confirmations or warranty information for household purchases, always with his knowledge. This was different. This was deliberate investigation, the crossing of a boundary I'd never imagined breaching. The resort confirmation appeared immediately in his inbox, the details laid bare in pixels: a beachfront villa with private pool, champagne service, couples, massage package. An unmistakable romantic getaway, booked for 2. The reservation clearly specified Mr. Sebastian Donovan and guest. Not colleagues, not team. A single guest. My hands were steady as I continued searching, a strange calm settling over me as one revelation led to another. In his deleted folder, I found the original airline confirmation. Not to Singapore, but direct to Denpasar, Bali. A first-class booking for 2 passengers, Sebastian Donovan and Avery Williams. Avery. Our friend. My friend. The betrayal crystallized. No longer a suspicion, but a certainty. Sebastian hadn't canceled our anniversary trip because of work. He had canceled our trip to take another woman to a romantic island getaway, using our joint credit card no less. The audacity of it was almost impressive. Almost. I leaned back in my chair, oddly detached as I processed this new reality. The Sebastian I thought I knew, honest, conscientious, respectful, couldn't possibly have orchestrated such an elaborate deception, and yet the evidence was irrefutable. Without conscious decision, I found myself opening Instagram, typing Avery's username in the search bar. Her profile appeared, and there it was, a story posted 2 hours earlier. A champagne flute held against a backdrop of turquoise ocean, Mount Agung visible in the distance. Paradise found, read the caption. No location tag, no mention of companions, but unmistakably Bali. Unmistakably the same resort charged to our credit card. I watched the story twice before taking a screenshot. Moments later, it vanished, deleted, perhaps, in a belated recognition of its damning nature. Too late. The evidence was already saved to my phone, along with the resort confirmation, the flight details, the location data. A digital trail of betrayal. I spent the next hour methodically gathering more proof, driven by an almost clinical need for comprehensive understanding. I called Sebastian's office under the pretext of sending important documents, only to learn that while the Singapore project was indeed facing challenges, the situation was being managed remotely. No emergency trip had been necessary. No team had flown out. "Is Sebastian not reachable?" asked his colleague, confusion evident in her tone. "I just got an email from him this morning about the Robertson blueprints. Reception is spotty where." "He is," I improvised, my voice remarkably steady. I'll try him again later. The final confirmation came from Eric, Sebastian's assistant of 3 years. I had always maintained a friendly relationship with Eric, occasionally bringing him homemade cookies when visiting Sebastian at the office, remembering his birthday with a card each year. The concern in my voice wasn't entirely feigned when I called him. Eric, I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm having trouble reaching Sebastian. His last message mentioned the Singapore crisis, but now I can't get through. A pause, heavy with discomfort. Kara, I'm really not comfortable getting in the middle of this. I think you should talk to Sebastian directly. Eric, please. I'm worried. Just tell me if he arrived safely in Singapore. Another pause, longer this time. I can't do that, Kara. Because he's not in Singapore, I stated flatly, no longer a question. Eric's silence was answer enough. Do you know where he actually is? I think you already know, he said quietly. I'm sorry, Kara, I really am. After hanging up, I sat motionless at my desk, staring at the collection of evidence assembled on my laptop screen. The facts were undeniable. Sebastian had lied about the emergency conference, fabricated a work crisis, and flown to Bali with Avery, all while I remained behind, believing his deception completely. What struck me most wasn't the affair itself, though that pain would surely come later, but the elaborate nature of the lie. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or an impulsive mistake. This was calculated, premeditated betrayal requiring weeks of planning, multiple layers of deception, and the cruel irony of using our anniversary as cover. The question wasn't whether Sebastian had betrayed me. The evidence was irrefutable. The question was what I would do with this knowledge. For a brief moment, I considered calling him immediately, unleashing my fury from the safety of distance. I imagined his stammered excuses, his panicked attempt to explain away the unexplainable. But that scenario offered no real satisfaction. Words over a phone connection couldn't possibly convey the magnitude of his betrayal or the depth of my resolve. No, this confrontation needed to happen face to face. I needed to see his expression when he realized his carefully constructed deception had collapsed. I needed Avery to look me in the eyes as I exposed their betrayal. Most importantly, I needed to reclaim my agency in this narrative, to transform myself from unwitting victim to architect of consequence. With newfound clarity, I opened my laptop and navigated to the airline website. Within 20 minutes, I had booked a one-way ticket to Denpasar, Bali, departing that evening. The cost was exorbitant for such last-minute international travel, but I charged it without hesitation to my personal credit card, the one Sebastian couldn't monitor. As I packed a small suitcase, selecting items with mechanical efficiency, I felt a strange sense of purpose replacing my initial shock. The hurt would come later, I knew. The full emotional impact of this betrayal was still being held at bay by adrenaline and resolve. But for now, that emotional distance served me well, allowing me to plan methodically, to think clearly despite the chaos unfolding around me. Sebastian had always prided himself on anticipating all contingencies in his architectural projects, on leaving nothing to chance. How ironic that in constructing this elaborate deception, he had failed to anticipate the simplest contingency of all. That technology would betray him just as thoroughly as he had betrayed me. And now I was boarding a flight to Bali, following the digital breadcrumbs of his deception straight to the beachfront villa, where he thought himself safely hidden with Avery. The confrontation that awaited would redefine everything: our past, our present, and whatever future remained after the truth was finally spoken aloud. The 16-hour flight to Bali felt surreal, a liminal space suspended between the life I had known and the uncertain future that awaited me. I sat rigidly in my economy seat, surrounded by honeymooners and vacationers whose excitement formed a cruel counterpoint to my mission. My mind cycled relentlessly through the evidence I had gathered, searching for alternative explanations, finding none. I had left a vague message at my school claiming a family emergency, not entirely untrue, and arranged for a colleague to cover my classes for the week. The ordinary responsibilities of my life seemed distant now, inconsequential compared to the seismic shift occurring in my marriage. Sleep eluded me entirely during the flight. Instead, I used the time to continue my investigation, methodically, combing through emails, text messages, and calendar entries I had downloaded from Sebastian's accounts before leaving home. What emerged was a pattern more extensive than I had initially realized. Not a sudden affair, but a relationship that had been developing for months, hidden in plain sight. January. Sebastian and Avery both attended a 3-day architectural conference in Chicago. According to the firm's expense reports, they had booked separate rooms. But Sebastian's personal credit card, the statement for which came to our home in an envelope I had never thought to open, showed room service charges for 2 at odd hours, movie rentals, and a significant charge at the hotel spa for a couple's massage. March. The night he claimed to be working late on the Singapore project specifications, his location history showed him at an upscale restaurant near Avery's downtown condo, followed by a 4-hour gap where his phone remained stationary at her address. He had returned home past midnight, kissing my forehead as I pretended to sleep, smelling of unfamiliar perfume. April. A weekend team-building retreat that coincided with Avery's social media posts from a vineyard in the hill country. No other team members appeared in her carefully framed photos, though several showed a man's hand holding a wine glass, his distinctive watch, my anniversary gift to Sebastian last year, partially visible at the edge of the frame. The evidence accumulated, damning in its consistency. At some point, the timeline I was creating shifted from investigation to self-torture. Each new discovery another laceration across my already wounded trust. I closed my laptop, staring instead at the airplane ceiling, allowing the anger to replace the hurt. Anger felt cleaner somehow, more actionable. When I landed in Denpasar, the humid heat hit me like a physical barrier as I exited the air-conditioned terminal. I had researched the fastest route to the Nirvana resort, arranging a private car service, rather than risking the unpredictable local taxis. The driver, a middle-aged Balinese man named Ketut, greeted me with a warm smile and a bottle of cold water. "First time in Bali?" he asked as we pulled away from the airport. "Yes," I replied, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. "I'm meeting my husband. It's a surprise." "Ah, romantic surprise. He will be very happy." I managed a tight smile. Very surprised, certainly. The drive to the resort took nearly 2 hours, winding through congested streets that eventually gave way to lush landscapes of terraced rice fields and distant volcanic peaks. Under different circumstances, I might have found the scenery breathtaking. Now, I barely registered the beauty around me, focused entirely on what awaited at our destination. I used the drive to refine my approach. Direct confrontation was inevitable, but the specific circumstances would determine my exact strategy. I needed to understand the layout of the resort, locate their villa without being noticed, and time my arrival for maximum impact. The element of surprise was my only advantage. Once lost, it couldn't be reclaimed. The Nirvana resort is one of our most exclusive, Ketut offered as we approached a discreet entrance marked only by an elegant stone sign partially hidden by tropical foliage. Many celebrities, very private. "Perfect," I murmured, understanding. Now why Sebastian had selected this particular location. The resort's emphasis on privacy and discretion made it ideal for a clandestine getaway. I had booked a room at a different hotel nearby, a practical necessity since I couldn't exactly share accommodations with the couple I intended to confront. But before checking in, I needed reconnaissance. I asked Ketut to drop me at the Nirvana's main entrance, explaining that I would meet my husband in the lobby. "Would you like me to announce you?" the driver asked helpfully. "No, thank you. As I said, it's a surprise." The resort lobby was an architectural masterpiece of open-air Balinese design with soaring wooden beams, stone floors, and panoramic views of the Indian Ocean. A gentle breeze carried the scent of frangipani and salt water. At another time, in another life, I might have stood breathless at the beauty of it all. Instead, I approached the reception desk with focused determination. "Good afternoon," the receptionist greeted me with a practiced smile. "Welcome to Nirvana Resort and Spa. Do you have a reservation with us?" I hadn't planned my exact approach to this moment, but inspiration struck as I noticed a stack of gift bags behind the counter, presumably welcome packages for honeymooning couples. "Actually, I'm not staying here," I explained, adopting a conspiratorial tone. "My brother and his girlfriend are guests in one of your villas. It's their anniversary, and I wanted to surprise them with a special gift." I pulled out my phone, showing Sebastian's confirmation email that I had forwarded to myself. "Donovan? Sebastian Donovan?" The receptionist's professionalism wavered for just a moment as she glanced at the screen. "Ah, yes. Mr. Donovan and Ms. Williams are in Beachfront Villa 8. They arrived yesterday." The confirmation hit me with unexpected force. Hearing their names linked so officially by a stranger made the betrayal suddenly, viscerally real in a way the evidence alone hadn't accomplished. I maintained my composure with effort. "Perfect. I'd like to arrange for a special dinner setup on their terrace tonight. Something romantic with candles, champagne, the works." I leaned forward slightly. They've been through a rough patch, and this trip is their chance to reconnect. I want to help make it special. The receptionist brightened, clearly approving of my thoughtful gesture. "We would be happy to arrange that. Our sunset dinner package is very popular with couples. It includes a private chef, custom menu, flower, arrangements." "That sounds perfect," I interrupted smoothly. "Could I perhaps see the terrace to help with planning? I want to make sure it's arranged exactly right." She hesitated. "Our guests' privacy is very important." "Of course. I completely understand." I lowered my voice. "They're actually at a day tour right now, Mount Batur, I believe. They won't be back until late afternoon. I just want a quick look to help visualize the setup." This was a calculated risk. I had no idea of their actual whereabouts, but the suggestion of specific knowledge lent credibility to my story. The receptionist's hesitation dissolved. "Let me check if the villa is available for viewing." She made a brief call, speaking in Daos Ayas rapid Balinese before returning her attention to me. "One of our staff can show you the terrace area, but we cannot enter the villa itself while our guests are away." "That's all I need," I assured her. "Just to see the outdoor space." 20 minutes later, I stood on the private terrace of Villa 8, taking in the stunning ocean view that Sebastian and Avery had been enjoying at my expense. The infinity pool glittered in the afternoon sun. 2 lounge chairs sat close together. On the wooden deck, a half-empty bottle of wine on the small table between them. Inside, visible through floor-to-ceiling glass doors, I could see luggage, Sebastian's familiar leather duffel and a stylish weekender I recognized as Avery's, placed casually at the foot of a king-sized bed strewn with tropical flower petals. The resort staff member who had escorted me waited patiently as I surveyed the space, mistaking my silent absorption for event planning rather than the cataloging of evidence it actually was. "The dinner can be set up here," he indicated, pointing to a dining area at the edge of the terrace, with candles along the perimeter and floral arrangements on the table. Very romantic as the sun sets over the ocean. When would this be set up? I don't want them to see it being prepared. It would ruin the surprise. We typically begin setup at 5:30 for the 7:01 dinner service, when most guests are preparing for the evening in their villas. I checked my watch. Nearly 3 p.m. now. "And housekeeping? When do they service the villas?" "Morning service is complete. Evening turndown begins at 5 p.m. I nodded, piecing together the schedule information. "Perfect. Let's arrange the dinner for tonight." I'll handle payment now, including a generous gratuity for the staff. As we walked back to the lobby, I continued gathering intelligence under the guise of planning the surprise. The staff member, encouraged by my apparent generosity, shared that most guests returned from day excursions by 4:30, and that Sebastian and Avery had indeed booked the Mount Bader sunrise trek for that morning, followed by a visit to a local coffee plantation. They were expected back at the resort by late afternoon. In the lobby, I completed the dinner arrangement, paying with my personal credit card and adding detailed instructions about the timing. Then I returned to my waiting driver, directing him to take me to my hotel a few kilometers away. I needed to prepare for the confrontation, not just emotionally, but strategically. By 4:45 p.m., I had checked into my hotel, showered away the travel grime, and changed into a simple white linen dress that conveyed exactly the image I wanted to project. Calm, composed, unbreakable. My hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, my makeup minimal but precise. I looked like someone in control, exactly the opposite of how I felt inside. I returned to the Nirvana Resort by taxi, instructing the driver to wait outside. The dinner setup would be my entry point, my explanation for being on the property, without raising suspicions. After that, timing would be everything. The confrontation I had traveled halfway around the world for was now just minutes away. The resort staff recognized me immediately upon my return, greeting me warmly as the thoughtful sister arranging a surprise anniversary dinner. I explained that I wanted to add a personal touch to the table setting, a framed photograph of the couple that I'd brought along. Could I place it myself? Just before they return? I promise I'll be quick and discreet, the staff member assigned. To coordinate the dinner, a young woman named Rosie hesitated only briefly before agreeing. The setup is almost complete. I can take you there now if you'd like. Perfect, I replied, clutching my small handbag containing not a framed photograph, but the printed evidence of Sebastian and Avery's deception. As we approached Villa 8, Rosie's radio crackled with a message in Balinese. She listened, then turned to me with an apologetic smile. It seems Mr. Donovan and Ms. Williams have just returned from their excursion. They're at the main pool area having drinks. Would you prefer to wait until they leave again? My heart rate accelerated, but my voice remained steady. Actually, that's even better. I'd like to see their reaction in person. Would you mind taking me to the pool area instead? I can surprise them there. Rosie led me through lush tropical gardens toward the resort's main infinity pool, which overlooked the ocean from a dramatic cliff edge. And there they were, Sebastian and Avery, seated at a corner table beneath a canvas umbrella, tropical cocktails before them, her hand casually resting on his arm as they laughed together. The sight hit me with physical force, a hollowing sensation, in my chest, as though something essential had been scooped out. Sebastian wore linen shorts and the blue shirt I'd given him for his birthday. Avery was stunning in a white bikini top and flowing skirt, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. They looked perfectly at ease, completely untroubled by the devastation their betrayal had wrought halfway around the world. Is that them? Rosie asked, following my gaze. Yes, I managed, my mouth suddenly dry. That's them. Would you like me to announce you? No, I said, finding my resolve again. I'll handle it from here. Thank you for your help. Rosie nodded and retreated, leaving me alone at the edge of the pool area, momentarily unnoticed by the couple. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and began walking toward their table with measured steps. Sebastian saw me first. The change in his expression would have been comical under different circumstances. The relaxed smile freezing, eyes widening in disbelief, all color draining from his face. Avery, noticing his sudden tension, turned to follow his gaze. Her reaction mirrored his, shock giving way to visible panic as she snatched her hand from his arm. Kara? Sebastian's voice was barely audible as I reached their table. What? How are you? Surprise, I said calmly, pulling out a chair and seating myself at their table. "Don't let me interrupt your romantic getaway." Avery stood abruptly, her cocktail glass tipping over. "I should go." "Sit down, Avery," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. "You're as much a part of this conversation as he is." To my mild surprise, she complied, sinking back into her chair, eyes fixed on the spilled drink spreading across the table. Sebastian attempted recovery, his architect's mind visibly working to reconstruct a foundation that had completely collapsed. "Kara, this isn't... We were just... working on the Singapore emergency?" I supplied. "Fascinating how Singapore has beaches identical to Bali these days. The wonders of modern architecture." "I can explain," he began, but the words sounded hollow even to him, trailing off into uncertain silence. "Can you?" I removed my phone from my bag, placing it on the table between us. "Can you explain the reservation confirmation sent to your email, or the couple's massage scheduled for tomorrow morning? Perhaps you can explain the charge on our joint credit card, the one I received a security alert about." I turned to Avery. "Or maybe you can explain why you deleted your Instagram story this morning, the one with the ocean view from your villa. The sunset cocktail was a nice touch." They exchanged glances, the silent communication of conspirators whose plot has been discovered. "How did you find us?" Sebastian finally asked, a question so spectacularly missing the point that I almost laughed. "That's your question? Not, why did I betray my wife of 8 years? Not, why did I create an elaborate lie about a work emergency while actually planning a romantic vacation with another woman?" Avery spoke for the first time, her voice uncharacteristically small. "Kara, we never meant for you to find out this way." The absurdity of her statement broke through the calm I had been maintaining. "Really? How exactly did you mean for me to find out? After months of deception? After returning home to our house, our home, and continuing the lie? Did you have a plan for that, Avery? A convenient timeline for when you'd stop pretending to be my friend?" Sebastian reached for my hand across the table. I withdrew it sharply. "Kara, please. Let's go somewhere private to discuss this." "No," I replied firmly. "I didn't fly 16 hours to have a private conversation. I came for the truth. Right here. Right now." Around us, other resort guests were beginning to notice the tension at our table, casting curious glances in our direction. Sebastian noticed too, his eyes darting nervously to the observers. "How long?" I asked, my voice hardening. "How long has this been going on?" Sebastian and Avery exchanged another glance, another silent communication that excluded me. "Before," he answered. 6 months, he admitted quietly. "Since the Chicago conference. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Half a year of coming home to me, sleeping beside me, planning our anniversary trip to Greece while secretly building a relationship with Avery." The first real pain broke through my protective anger, a sharp twisting sensation that took my breath away. 6 months of deception meant our entire recent history needed rewriting. Every conversation, every intimate moment, every apparent act of love now cast in the shadow of his betrayal. "And our anniversary trip?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "The one you canceled 3 days ago due to a work emergency?" Sebastian couldn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry, Kara. I didn't know how to tell you. So instead, you crafted an elaborate lie. You made me feel guilty for being disappointed. You made me comfort you about your fictional work crisis." My voice remained steady, though inside I was fracturing. "Tell me, was any of it real? Any of the last 8 years? Or was I just a convenient placeholder until something better came along?" "Of course it was real," Sebastian insisted, leaning forward intently. 8 years of marriage doesn't just stop." I interrupted, holding up my hand. "You've lost the right to tell me what our marriage was or wasn't." Around us, the paradise setting continued its cruel mockery. Gentle waves lapping at the shoreline below. Tropical birds calling from swaying palms. resort staff discreetly refilling water glasses and delivering fresh towels to sunbathers. The ordinariness of it all, life continuing unchanged despite my world imploding, felt like an additional betrayal. Avery shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her earlier confidence now visibly shaken. Kara, none of this was planned. It just happened. Things like this don't just happen, Avery, I replied, my voice controlled despite the tornado of emotions whirling inside me. Secret email accounts don't create themselves. Flight itineraries don't book themselves. Anniversary trips don't cancel themselves. I turned back to Sebastian. You made choices. Hundreds of individual choices, each one a deliberate decision to betray me. Sebastian ran his hand through his hair, a familiar gesture that now seemed to belong to a stranger. The man before me, with his carefully cultivated appearance and practiced expressions, suddenly seemed like an actor playing a role I had mistaken for reality. I never wanted to hurt you, he offered weakly. A small, bitter laugh escaped me. And yet here we are, in Bali, where you brought another woman on what was supposed to be our anniversary trip. The absurdity of it all hit me afresh. Did you even consider how I would feel? Or was I so insignificant that my feelings never factored into your calculations? Sebastian fell silent, his expression a mixture of guilt and something that looked unsettlingly like relief. The relief of a man no longer required to maintain a fiction. I should go, Avery said again, making a move to stand. Running away won't undo what you've done, I told her, surprised by the steadiness of my voice despite the emotion churning beneath the surface. 6 years of friendship, Avery. 6 years. Of dinner parties and celebrations and confidences. I trusted you. I defended you when others called you cold or calculating. And all this time— It wasn't all this time, she insisted, a flash of defiance returning to her eyes. Sebastian and I were just friends, colleagues, until Chicago. I never planned. Yet here you are, I cut her off, in a couple's villa in Bali, with my husband, during what was supposed to be our anniversary celebration. A resort staff member approached cautiously, likely responding to the visible tension at our table. Is everything all right here? Can I bring you anything? We're fine, Sebastian answered quickly, obviously hoping to prevent a scene. Actually, I corrected, I'd like a gin and tonic, please, and the bill for this table when it's ready. The staff member nodded and retreated, leaving us once again in the purgatory of our confrontation. For several moments, no one spoke. The weight of unspoken truths and shattered trust hung in the air between us like tropical humidity, oppressive, inescapable. I looked out over the infinity pool to the ocean beyond, its vast blueness stretching toward a horizon I couldn't see. That morning, was it only this morning? I had been in Austin, surrounded by the familiar contours of my life. Now I sat an ocean away, facing the ruins of a marriage I had believed solid, confronting a betrayal so complete it required recategorizing. My entire past. The pain finally caught up with me, rising like floodwater, threatening to drown the anger that had propelled me forward. I felt tears building but refused to release them. I would not break, not here, not in front of them. Do you love her? I asked Sebastian, the question escaping before I could reconsider its wisdom. He hesitated. An answer in itself. Kara, it's complicated. That's not what I asked. Sebastian looked at Avery, then back to me. I didn't plan for any of this to happen. But yes, I have feelings for her. The words landed like physical blows. Despite the evidence, despite flying across the world to confront them, some part of me had still hoped for another explanation, one that would hurt but not destroy, one that might leave some foundation upon which to rebuild. The staff member returned with my drink and the check. Sebastian reached for it automatically. I've got it, I said, taking the folder and inserting my credit card. Consider it my parting gift. Sebastian's expression tightened. Kara, don't be like this. We need to talk about what happens next, about us. There is no us anymore, I replied, the words surprisingly easy to say now that the truth had been spoken aloud. You made that decision 6 months ago in Chicago. You just didn't bother to inform me. Avery, who had remained silent during this exchange, suddenly spoke. I never meant to hurt you, Kara. You have to believe that. I regarded her with newfound clarity. The woman I had considered a friend now seemed like a stranger, her familiar features rearranged into someone I didn't recognize. What I believe, I said carefully, is that you both constructed an elaborate deception because it was convenient and comfortable. You didn't want to deal with the mess or the guilt, so you created a parallel reality where you could have everything. You wanted without consequences. I signed the check as the staff member returned for it. But actions have consequences, even when we hide from them. Sebastian leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. What are you going to do? The question struck me as oddly childish, as though I were a parent deciding on his punishment rather than a wife processing catastrophic betrayal. I'm going to finish my drink, I replied, taking a deliberate sip of the gin and tonic. And then, I'm going to walk away, just as you did, though with considerably more honesty. That's not what I meant, Sebastian pressed. About us, about our life together. I looked at him directly, seeing him with painful clarity. Our life together ended the moment you decided to pursue a relationship with Avery while maintaining the fiction of our marriage. Everything that follows is just paperwork. The tropical sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the pool deck. In the golden light, Sebastian and Avery looked almost unreal. Beautiful, distant figures in a glossy travel magazine. Strangers I might have envied from afar without knowing the ugliness beneath the surface. I'll be returning to Austin tomorrow, I said, standing and gathering my bag. I suggest you use this time to find alternate accommodations. I don't want you in our house when I return. Kara, please, Sebastian began, but stopped when I raised my hand. Enjoy your paradise, I said quietly. You've paid for it dearly. We all have. With that, I turned and walked away, my steps measured and steady despite the earthquake within me. The tears would come later, I knew. The full reckoning with pain and loss. But in this moment, walking away from the wreckage of my marriage with my dignity intact felt like the first step toward whatever came next. I woke the next morning in my hotel room, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. For one blessed second, everything was normal. Just another day, another hotel room on another trip. Then reality crashed back, the events of the previous day replaying in vivid, painful detail. Sebastian's face when he first saw me. Avery's, hand snatching away from his arm, the confirmation of a 6-month affair. The destruction of an 8-year marriage. I had expected to cry myself to sleep, to spend the night curled around my pain like a wounded animal. Instead, I had returned to my hotel room and fallen into a deep, dreamless sleep, my body surrendering to exhaustion while my mind retreated from the emotional tsunami. Now, in the harsh morning light filtering through thin curtains, the reality of my situation demanded attention. I was in Bali, thousands of miles from home, facing the disintegration of my marriage and the betrayal of 2 people I had trusted implicitly. The practical questions began to surface. What happened next? How would we disentangle 8 years of shared life? What would I return to in Austin? Almost mechanically, I reached for my phone, scrolling through notifications that seemed to belong to another lifetime. Emails from colleagues about curriculum planning, a reminder about my dentist appointment next week, a text from my neighbor about collecting a package. The ordinary machinery of life continuing its operation despite the catastrophic breakdown of its central components. I set the phone aside and moved to the small hotel balcony, looking out over a view far less spectacular than the one Sebastian and Avery were enjoying at the Nirvana resort. Palm trees swayed in the morning breeze, and the distant sound of motorbikes drifted up from the street below. Life in Bali continued, indifferent to my personal apocalypse. I had booked a return flight for later that day, assuming that the confrontation would provide the closure I needed before leaving. But as I sipped the mediocre coffee provided by the hotel, I realized I wasn't ready to leave yet. The confrontation had answered some questions but opened others, and a growing suspicion had taken root during the sleepless parts of the night. 6 months, Sebastian had said. The affair had been going on for 6 months since the Chicago conference, but my investigation before leaving Austin had revealed inconsistencies going back further, subtle changes in Sebastian's behavior, unexplained, absences, growing distance. If the affair with Avery had truly begun only 6 months ago, what explained these earlier patterns? Was there more to uncover? Other betrayals I hadn't yet discovered? The thought propelled me back to my laptop. I canceled my return flight, extending my hotel reservation for 2 more days. If I was going to rebuild my life from the ashes of this marriage, I needed the complete truth, not just the partial confession Sebastian had offered under duress. I spent the morning methodically working, backward through digital records I hadn't previously examined carefully, credit card statements from the past year, location history data, travel itineraries, email exchanges with colleagues and clients, calendar entries that didn't align with the stories Sebastian had told me. A pattern emerged, one that suggested Sebastian's deception extended beyond Avery, beyond 6 months. There were unexplained hotel charges in cities where he claimed to be staying with colleagues, restaurant bills for 2 at establishments far too intimate for business meetings, a jewelry purchase last Valentine's Day that I had never received. Most damning was an email thread with someone named Bonnie, dated 9 months earlier, 3 months before the Chicago conference where Sebastian claimed his relationship with Avery began. The emails were carefully worded but unmistakably intimate, referencing our special weekend and memories I'll carry with me always. Who was Bonnie? I searched through Sebastian's contacts, finding no record of the name. A social media search revealed dozens of possibilities, but none with obvious connections to Sebastian or his firm. Yet the evidence suggested a relationship significant enough to warrant secret meetings and meaningful gifts. I sat back, absorbing the implications. Sebastian's affair with Avery might not have been a singular lapse, but part of a pattern, a habit of deception that potentially stretched back further than I had imagined. The foundation of our marriage had been compromised not by a single earthquake, but by years of hidden erosion. My phone chimed with a text from Sebastian. "We need to talk. Please tell me where you're staying." I ignored it, continuing my investigation. Another text followed 10 minutes later. "Kara, I understand you're angry, but we need to discuss practicalities. Please respond." The audacity of his expectation that I would accommodate his desire for conversation on his timeline, that I would prioritize practicalities while still reeling from betrayal, fueled a fresh wave of determination. Sebastian had controlled the narrative for months, perhaps years. He would not dictate the terms of its unraveling. A third text arrived around noon. "I've booked a flight home for tomorrow. Avery's leaving today. Please talk to me before I go." This one gave me pause. If they were cutting their luxury getaway short, returning separately rather than together, perhaps the confrontation had fractured something between them as well. The thought brought no satisfaction, only a hollow recognition of how thoroughly our interconnected lives had been damaged. I turned back to my laptop, pursuing a new line of investigation. If Sebastian had been deceptive about his fidelity, what else might he have concealed? Our finances had always been relatively transparent, or so I had believed. but I had trusted Sebastian's updates about investments, retirement accounts, and major expenditures without verifying the details. What I discovered in the next hour left me breathless with a new kind of shock. Sebastian had withdrawn significant sums from our joint investment account over the past year, nearly $50,000 in total, transferred to a personal account I hadn't known existed. The most recent withdrawal had been made just 2 weeks before, our planned Greece trip, coinciding suspiciously with the booking of the Bali reservation. The scale of deception expanded beyond the emotional betrayal into financial infidelity as well. Had he been planning an exit strategy? Securing funds for a new life with Avery? Or was this money connected to other secrets I had yet to uncover? I documented everything meticulously, taking screenshots, saving records, creating a timeline of discrepancies. The woman who had flown to Bali on impulse, driven by emotional devastation, was transforming into someone more calculated, more strategic, someone determined to understand the full scope of her husband's betrayal before determining her next move. By late afternoon, I had compiled enough evidence to suggest that Sebastian's deception was neither recent nor limited to a single affair. The man I had married, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, had been living a compartmentalized life for years, maintaining our marriage as a comfortable home base while pursuing other relationships and systematically diverting our shared resources. The realization should have deepened my pain. Instead, it crystallized my resolve. This was no longer just about confronting an affair or mourning a marriage. This was about reclaiming my agency from someone who had deliberately undermined it for years, about establishing the complete truth before deciding how to move forward. I opened the hotel room window, letting the warm Balinese air wash over me. The tropical scents of frangipani and distant cooking spices filled the room, a sensory reminder that I was far from home, yet somehow closer to understanding than I had been in my familiar surroundings. Tomorrow, I would confront Sebastian again, not with emotional accusations, but with documented evidence of his systematic deception. I would demand answers about Bonnie, about the missing money, about the entire alternative narrative of our marriage that he had constructed without my knowledge, and then, with the complete truth finally in the open, I would decide what remained, worth saving in the ruins of the life we had built. The next morning, I texted Sebastian a time and location, a small cafe near my hotel, public enough to discourage dramatic scenes, but quiet enough for serious conversation. His reply came instantly, suggesting he had been waiting by his phone. "I'll be there, thank you." I arrived early, selecting a corner table that offered both privacy and a clear view of the entrance. I ordered a coffee I didn't want, arranging my evidence in a precise stack beside it, printouts of financial transactions, email exchanges, location data, all organized chronologically to tell the story of Sebastian's deception. When he entered, I barely recognized him. Gone was the confident architect, the man who moved through spaces as though he had designed them himself. In his place stood someone diminished, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes darting nervously around the cafe until they landed on me. He wore rumpled linen pants and a plain white t-shirt, an uncharacteristic lack of polish that spoke volumes about his mental state. "Kara," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." I didn't acknowledge the gratitude. "Where's Avery?" "She left last night. Took an earlier flight." He ran a hand through his uncombed hair. "After you found us, things changed between us. The reality of what we'd done became unavoidable." "How convenient," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "It only became unavoidable when you were caught." Sebastian sighed, a sound that once would have evoked my sympathy. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be. What we did was unforgivable." "I didn't come here to discuss forgiveness," I said, sliding the stack of papers toward him. "I came for the truth, the complete truth." He glanced at the papers, confusion flickering across his face. I've told you the truth. Avery and I are just part of the story, I finished for him. I spent yesterday digging deeper, Sebastian, and what I found suggests your deception goes far beyond a 6-month affair with Avery. Color drained from his face as he looked more carefully at the top sheet. A credit card statement from 11 months ago showing charges at a boutique hotel in Houston where he had supposedly attended a conference alone. Who is Bonnie? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. His eyes closed briefly, a man watching his carefully constructed narrative collapse. How did you find out about her? You're not the only one who knows how to search an email account, I replied. The better question is, were you ever going to tell me about her, or about the other women before her? Or about the $50,000 you've withdrawn from our joint investments over the past year? Sebastian's expression shifted through shock, guilt, and finally a resigned acknowledgement. He didn't deny any of it, which was perhaps the only honesty in our entire exchange. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Like what exactly? You weren't supposed to get caught? I wasn't supposed to discover that my entire marriage has been a fiction? He shook his head, looking not at me but at some middle distance between us. I never planned to hurt you, Kara. When we got married, I meant every word of my vows. I loved you. I still love you, in my way. Your way, I repeated, the words tasting bitter. Which apparently includes serial infidelity and financial deception. It's not that simple. Then explain it to me, I challenged. Help me understand how the man I built a life with could systematically betray every aspect of our partnership while coming home each night, while planning anniversaries, while talking about our future. Sebastian was silent for a long moment, seemingly gathering thoughts that had never been articulated aloud. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, stripped of its usual polish, raw with a truth he had perhaps never fully acknowledged, to himself. I've never been faithful to anyone, he said quietly. Not just in our marriage, in any relationship I've ever had. There's something broken in me, something that always seeks the new, the different, the escape from whatever commitment I've made. He looked up at me, his eyes showing a vulnerability I had rarely seen. With you, I thought it would be different. You are extraordinary. Intelligent, compassionate, stable in all the ways I'm not. I convinced myself that marriage to you would fix whatever was wrong with me, that your goodness would somehow transform me into someone worthy of it. I listened without interrupting, my anger temporarily suspended by this unexpected glimpse into a version of Sebastian I had never known existed. For a while, it worked, he continued. The first few years, I was faithful, committed. I thought I'd finally outgrown whatever compulsion had driven me before. But then old patterns returned, the restlessness, the dissatisfaction with what I had, the constant seeking for something else, something more. Bonnie was the first? I asked, needing the chronology of our disintegration. He nodded. About 18 months ago. A client at the firm, it lasted a few weeks. Then there were others. Brief connections. Nothing serious. Until Avery. And the money? I pressed, unwilling to let this critical piece remain unexplained. Sebastian's expression darkened with fresh shame. I've been gambling. Not in casinos. Investment. Schemes. High-risk ventures. Trying to recoup losses that kept growing. I was going to pay it back before you noticed. The absurdity of this statement hung between us, as though the theft were the problem rather than the deception itself. Almost laughed, a harsh sound that died in my throat. So our entire marriage has been a lie, I said flatly. No, Sebastian insisted, leaning forward intently. That's what you need to understand, Kara. The foundation was real. The life we built together, the connection we shared, that was genuine. My failures, my betrayals, they existed alongside something real, not in place of it. I considered his words, testing them against the evidence before me. Was it possible to simultaneously love someone and systematically betray them? Could the Sebastian who had held me through my father's death, who had celebrated my professional achievements with genuine pride, who had built a home with me brick by brick, also be the Sebastian who had maintained secret relationships and diverted our shared resources? You compartmentalized, I said, understanding dawning. You created separate selves, the devoted husband, the secret philanderer, the risk-taker, each operating independently without allowing the contradictions to surface. He nodded slowly, relief visible in his expression at being understood, if not forgiven. I never reconciled those parts of myself. I just managed them, kept them in separate boxes. Until now. Until I opened all the boxes at once, I finished. Yes. We sat in silence, the ambient noise of the cafe, espresso machines hissing, muted conversations in multiple languages, creating a surreal soundtrack to this moment of devastating clarity. The deeper truth of our marriage was finally visible. Sebastian had never been the person I believed him to be. Not because he had deliberately misrepresented himself, but because he had never fully integrated the disparate aspects of his own identity. He had loved me genuinely while betraying me repeatedly, each act somehow divorced from the other in his fragmented psychological landscape. Understanding this didn't diminish the pain or excuse the betrayal, but it did transform my perception of our shared history, not erasing the real connection we had built, but contextualizing it within a more complex, more tragic narrative than simple infidelity. "What happens now?" Sebastian asked quietly. I gathered the papers, returning them, to my bag with deliberate movements. "Now I go home and begin rebuilding my life without you. And you." I met his eyes directly. "You decide whether to continue living in fragments or to finally face yourself honestly." The Balinese afternoon had shifted into early evening by the time Sebastian and I parted. We had continued talking for hours, excavating the ruins of our marriage with archaeological precision, uncovering artifacts of both beauty and decay. Nothing changed. The facts of his betrayal remained unaltered, but something within me had transformed during those hours of painful honesty. I walked back to my hotel alone, the tropical air heavy with impending rain. The sky darkened as I reached my room, and within minutes, water was falling in sheets, drumming against the windows and rooftop. The sudden storm matched my internal landscape, a cleansing deluge after unbearable tension. Standing at the window, watching lightning illuminate the churning ocean in brief, electric moments, I felt the first real sensations of grief breaking through the protective numbness that had carried me since discovering Sebastian's betrayal. I allowed myself to cry finally. Not delicate tears, but gut-wrenching sobs that bent me double, hands pressed against the cool glass for support. I cried for the 8 years given to a marriage built on shifting sand, for the children we had, discussed but never had, for the anniversary trips and quiet Sunday mornings and inside jokes that had been real despite everything else, for the future I had imagined and would now never experience. When the storm of emotion finally subsided, I found myself curled on the bed, physically exhausted but mentally clearer than I had felt since the bank's security alert had first shattered my world. The pain remained, a persistent ache beneath my ribs, but no longer threatened to overwhelm me. In its wake came something unexpected, a growing sense of possibility. For years, I had unconsciously molded myself to fit Sebastian's life, adjusting my teaching schedule to accommodate his client meetings, prioritizing his career moves over my own opportunities, maintaining our home as a peaceful haven where he could decompress from professional stress. I had done these things willingly, believing them to be investments in our shared future. Now I faced the disorienting freedom of having only myself to consider. What did I want? Who was I outside the architecture of our marriage? These questions, dormant for nearly a decade, suddenly demanded attention. I opened my laptop, creating a new document titled simply, Next. Into it, I began pouring thoughts that surprised me with their clarity and conviction. I want to apply for the department chair position I declined last year because Sebastian thought the additional responsibilities would interfere with our plans to start a family. I want to finish the educational psychology research paper I abandoned when Sebastian's Singapore project demanded more of my support at home. I want to visit Japan, a trip Sebastian had always postponed because it didn't interest him enough. Want to sell the house. Too many memories. Too many rooms designed according to his architectural vision rather than my comfort. The list grew, each entry a small act of reclamation, a declaration of selfhood separate from the identity I had, constructed as Sebastian's wife. By the time I finished, the rain had stopped, and moonlight filtered through dispersing clouds, casting silvery patterns across the floor of my modest hotel room. I closed the laptop and moved to the bathroom, studying my reflection in the mirror. The woman who looked back at me appeared simultaneously familiar and foreign, the same features I had always known, but arranged with a new intensity, a nascent determination. This is where it begins, I told my reflection. Not with him, but with you. The next morning I woke early, my body still aligned with Austin time despite the days in Bali. The fresh light of dawn illuminated my room with gentle clarity, and I felt a strange lightness as I moved through my morning routine, as though yesterday's emotional catharsis had created space for something new to emerge. I had arranged to meet Sebastian one final time before my departure, not from any need for further closure, but to address practical matters that couldn't be avoided. We met at my hotel's beachfront cafe, both of us appearing more composed than during our previous encounter. "I've booked a moving company," Sebastian said after we had ordered coffee. "I'll be out of the house by the time you return, staying with my brother until I find a place." I nodded, appreciating this practical consideration. "I'll have my lawyer contact you about the separation agreement. I want this to be straightforward. No protracted battle." "Of course," he agreed quickly. "Whatever you want, Kara, I won't contest anything." The servility in his tone irritated me. This new, penitent Sebastian felt as inauthentic as the supposedly devoted husband had been. I preferred the raw honesty of yesterday's conversation to this performance of contrition. "This isn't about punishment," I clarified. "It's about fairness and moving forward efficiently." "I understand." He hesitated, then added, "I've scheduled an appointment with a therapist for when I get back, to work on everything we talked about." This surprised me. Sebastian had always dismissed therapy as self-indulgent navel-gazing when I'd suggested it during occasional rough patches in our marriage. His willingness to seek help now seemed to underscore the reality that our relationship had needed to break entirely before he could acknowledge its fundamental flaws. "That's good," I said simply. "I hope it helps you." We finished our coffee. In relative silence, the practical details of disentangling our lives requiring few words. As we prepared to part, likely for the last time before lawyers and mediators became our primary means of communication, Sebastian reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching mine. "I need to ask you something," he said, an unexpected vulnerability in his voice. "All those years, was any of it real for you? Were you happy at all?" The question caught me off guard. In the aftermath of betrayal, it would have been easy to rewrite our entire history as a tragedy, to deny the genuine happiness that had existed alongside the deception. But that would be another kind of lie. "Yes," I admitted. "There were years of real happiness, Sebastian. Moments of genuine connection. That's what makes this so painful. It wasn't all false, just incomplete." He nodded, absorbing this. "I'm sorry I couldn't be who you needed me to be, who I wanted to be for you." For the first time since discovering his betrayal, I felt a flash of genuine sympathy for Sebastian. His fragmented self had damaged not just me but him as well, a prison of his own construction from which he might never fully escape. "I hope you find a way to reconcile those different parts of yourself," I said, surprising myself with the sincerity of the wish. "Not for us, there is no more us, but for you." We said goodbye on the beach, the morning sun warming the sand beneath our feet. No dramatic embraces, no passionate declarations, just the quiet acknowledgement that what had once bound us together had irreversibly altered, creating separate paths forward. As I watched Sebastian walk away, becoming smaller against the expansive horizon, I felt the definitive shift within myself, the turning point between ending and beginning, between looking back and looking forward. The woman who had flown to Bali in desperate pursuit of truth would return to Austin fundamentally changed, not just by what she had discovered about her husband, but by what she had discovered about herself. I turned away from Sebastian's retreating figure, facing the endless ocean before me. Whatever came next, I would face it not as Sebastian's wife, not as a victim of betrayal, but as myself, complete, autonomous, and ready to begin again. The flight back to Austin stretched before me like a threshold between worlds. 20 hours of suspended animation during which I was neither the woman who had left, nor quite the one who would arrive. I used this liminal space to plan methodically, transforming emotional clarity into practical strategy. In the airport lounge, I made a series of decisive phone calls. First to my friend Rosie, a real estate agent whose business card had sat unused in my wallet for years. "I need to sell the house," I told her, bypassing preliminary small talk. "As quickly and cleanly as possible." "Kara?" Her voice registered, surprise at both my request and direct tone. "Are you okay? Is Sebastian okay?" "Sebastian and I are separating," I said, the words still strange but no longer devastating to speak aloud. "I'll explain everything when I'm back, but for now, I need to start the process. Can you help me?" Her professional instincts engaged immediately. "Of course. I'll prepare a market analysis before you return. Do you have a timeline in mind?" "I want it listed within 2 weeks," I replied, the decisiveness in my voice surprising, even me. "Sebastian will be moved out by the time I'm back." My next call was to an attorney, not the family lawyer who had handled our wills and house closing, but Marina Vargas, a divorce attorney recommended by a colleague who had navigated her own marital dissolution the previous year. Her secretary initially offered an appointment 3 weeks out, but something in my tone must have communicated urgency as Marina herself came on the line moments later. "I understand you're currently out of the country but need to discuss a separation immediately," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "Yes, I'll be back in Austin tomorrow evening. I'd like to meet as soon as possible to discuss options for an uncontested divorce." We arranged an appointment for the day after my return. Marina advised me to gather financial documents, account information, and a preliminary list of assets to be divided. "The more organized you are from the beginning, the smoother this will be," she explained, "especially if both parties are cooperative." My final call was to the school principal, requesting a meeting to discuss the department chair position. "I know I declined last year," I said, "but circumstances have changed. If the opportunity is still available, I'd like to be considered." Between calls, I created detailed lists and action plans in my notebook, addressing every aspect of the life transition ahead: financial adjustments, legal considerations, living arrangements, personal goals. The academic in me approached this deconstruction of my marriage with the same methodical thoroughness I applied to research projects, categorizing, prioritizing, establishing timelines. By the time I boarded the flight home, I had transformed nebulous emotional resolve into concrete steps forward. The grief remained, surfacing in unexpected waves during quiet moments: a remembered anniversary celebration, a shared joke referenced in a book I was reading to pass time. But these memories no longer paralyzed me. They simply existed alongside my determination to reconstruct my life. Midway through the flight, somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to close friends and family, people who would need to know about the separation before gossip inevitably spread. The message was direct but not detailed, offering no salacious explanations or accusations. After careful consideration, Sebastian and I have decided to end our marriage, I wrote. I'm returning to Austin tomorrow and would appreciate your support during this transition, though I may need some time before being ready for visitors or questions. The simple act of writing these words made our separation more real than signing legal documents would. This was the narrative I was choosing to present to those who had witnessed our marriage, the beginning of the story I would tell about its end. As the plane began its descent into American airspace, I found myself breathing more easily than I had in months, perhaps years. The uncertainty ahead no longer felt threatening but liberating. I was returning not to the remnants of a broken marriage, but to the foundation of a new beginning. The house stood exactly as I had left it, an architectural showpiece nestled among heritage oaks, the clean lines and expansive windows that had once represented our shared future, now feeling like a museum of past mistakes. I paused in the driveway, key in hand, steeling myself for the emotional impact of entering this space that was simultaneously familiar and forever altered. Sebastian had kept his word. The house showed signs of his hasty departure. His favorite leather reading chair was missing from the living room. The built-in bookshelf contained gaps where his architecture volumes and design magazines had been. His toiletries had vanished from the master bathroom, leaving behind clean countertops and empty drawers. But these absences merely highlighted how much remained: the furniture we had selected together, the art collected during our travels, the kitchen designed around our shared love of cooking. Every corner held memories, each object a potential emotional landmine. The cumulative weight of 8 years of shared life pressed against my chest, threatening to collapse the careful composure I had maintained during the journey home. I moved through the rooms methodically, windows open to dispel the stillness, making mental notes of what to keep, what to sell, what to discard. This initial survey wasn't about sorting possessions, but about reclaiming space, transforming what had been ours back into something I could inhabit without constant reminders of betrayal. My phone chimed with text messages from well-meaning friends who had received my email announcement. I silenced it without reading them, not yet ready for the inevitable questions and expressions of sympathy. There would be time for that later, after I had secured the foundations of my new reality. The morning brought my appointment with Marina, the divorce attorney. Her office occupied a converted Victorian house downtown, the interior surprisingly modern behind the historic facade. Like me, she wasted no time on pleasantries beyond minimal courtesy. In an uncontested divorce, assuming both parties are cooperative and finances aren't overly complex, we can potentially complete proceedings within 3 to 6 months, she explained, reviewing the documents I had brought. Texas is a community property state, which simplifies division of assets acquired during marriage. I nodded, having researched this thoroughly during my flight home. Sebastian has agreed not to contest anything. I believe he'll sign whatever is reasonable. Marina's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened. In my experience, guilt makes people agreeable initially, but that can change as proceedings advance. Let's prepare as though this will remain amicable while protecting your interests, if it doesn't. We spent the next hour outlining strategy, the house sale, division of investment accounts, including addressing the money Sebastian had diverted, retirement considerations, and tax implications. By the time I left her office, the abstract concept of divorce had transformed into a concrete sequence of legal steps, each with its own timeline and requirements. From Marina's office, I drove directly to my school for the meeting with Principal Wallace about the department chair position. The familiar campus provided an odd comfort. a part of my life that had remained unchanged despite the upheaval in my personal world. Frankly, we never filled the position after you declined, Wallace admitted as I sat across from him in his office. We redistributed responsibilities temporarily, but the department needs dedicated leadership. Your timing is actually perfect. I outlined my vision for the psychology department, expanded AP offerings, research partnerships with local universities, interdisciplinary collaboration with the science and humanities departments. As I spoke, I felt a growing enthusiasm that had nothing to do with distraction from personal problems and everything to do with genuine professional passion that had been simmering, unattended, for too long. The position would start officially next term, but we'd like you to begin transitional planning immediately, Wallace said as our meeting concluded. Would that timeline work for you? It's ideal, I replied, realizing the synchronicity of this professional opportunity aligning precisely with my personal recalibration. I have a lot of changes happening right now, focusing on building something. Positive feels exactly right. Driving home, I was struck by how differently I navigated the familiar streets of Austin, not as Sebastian's wife returning to our shared home, but as Kara the educator, the soon-to-be department chair, the woman, reclaiming her independence. The subtle shift in identity felt fundamental, as though I were not just changing circumstances but evolving into someone new, yet authentically me. That evening, as twilight transformed the house with gentle shadows, I sat on the back deck with a glass of wine, looking out over the garden we had planned together. Tomorrow would bring more meetings, more decisions, more steps toward disentanglement. But tonight, in this moment of transition between ending and beginning, I allowed myself to acknowledge both the loss of what had been and the promise of what might yet be. The journey from devastation to determination wasn't complete. Grief still waited in quiet moments. Questions still surfaced in the night. But I was moving forward with purpose now, each step taking me further from betrayal and closer to a life redesigned according to my own blueprint. 2 weeks after my return from Bali, the practical mechanisms of dismantling a marriage were well underway. The house had been listed with Rosie and had already attracted several interested buyers. Marina had drafted separation agreements that now awaited Sebastian's signature. My new role as department chair had been officially announced to the faculty, generating congratulatory emails and invitations to celebratory dinners I wasn't yet ready to accept. On the surface, I was functioning with remarkable efficiency, meeting deadlines, making decisions, responding appropriately to the concerned, inquiries of friends, but beneath this productive exterior, emotional resolution remained elusive. Despite understanding the factual reality of Sebastian's betrayal, some part of me still struggled to fully grasp the scope of his deception. The man who had shared my bed, my home, my future plans, had he ever truly existed? Or had he always been a carefully constructed fiction? I needed to see him one more time, not to attempt reconciliation or even to seek additional explanations, but to observe him, with my newly calibrated perception, to confirm for myself that the man I had married and the man who had betrayed me were indeed the same person. The opportunity came unexpectedly, through a text from Eric, Sebastian's assistant. Thought you should know, Sebastian's presenting. The Singapore project at the Central Library tonight. Public lecture. Starts at 7. The message carried no judgment or suggestion, just information offered as a courtesy. I sat with it for several hours, initially dismissing the idea of attending, then gradually recognizing it as the opportunity I hadn't realized I was waiting for. By 6:45 that evening, I was seated near the back of the library's event space, positioned where I could observe without being immediately visible. I had dressed with deliberate neutrality, neither the polished professional look Sebastian was accustomed to seeing me in at his firm events, nor the casual comfort of our home life. Just another anonymous attendee among the scattered audience of architecture students, industry professionals, and civic-minded citizens. At precisely 7, Sebastian walked onto the small stage. He looked thinner than when I'd last seen him in Bali, the cut of his suit slightly looser across the shoulders. His presentation material was impeccably prepared. The architectural renderings of the Singapore project displayed with the perfect balance of technical detail and aesthetic appeal that had always characterized his professional work. As he began speaking, I studied him with the detached interest of an anthropologist observing a subject from another culture. His mannerisms were exactly as I remembered. The slight gesture with his right hand when emphasizing key points, the measured pace of his explanations, the self-deprecating humor inserted strategically to engage the audience. This was the Sebastian I had known, the skilled professional whose passion for his work had been one of the qualities that attracted me to him initially. Yet, as I watched, I noticed subtle indicators I might have missed before, or perhaps chosen not to see. The careful compartmentalization that had allowed him to maintain his double life was visible in how completely he inhabited this professional persona, with no hint of the personal turmoil surely affecting him. The charm he directed toward audience members during the Q&A session carried the same practiced quality that I now recognized had characterized many of our own interactions. Most revealing was the moment when someone asked about the project's timeline, and Sebastian provided a detailed answer that neatly obscured the actual delays and problems I knew the project had encountered. It wasn't that he was lying exactly. He was presenting a curated version of reality, one that served his purposes and maintained the impression he wished to create, just as he had done throughout our marriage. The realization settled over me with surprising gentleness. There was no shock, no renewed pain, just clarity. The Sebastian I had married and the Sebastian who had betrayed me were indeed the same person. The distinction existed not in him, but in my perception, in my willingness to see the whole truth rather than the partial reality I had accepted for years. As the presentation concluded and attendees moved toward the reception area for refreshments, I slipped out a side door, my observation complete. I had seen what I needed to see. Not Sebastian performing on stage, but my own evolution from a woman who had built her life around a partial truth to one who insisted on seeing reality complete, however complex or painful. Walking to my car in the cool evening air, I felt the final piece of my emotional understanding click into place. The marriage I was leaving had been real in many ways. The shared experiences, the genuine moments of connection, the life we had built together. But it had been built on a foundation that included deliberate omissions, carefully maintained illusions, and Sebastian's fragmented selfhood. I didn't need to deny the authentic parts to recognize the flaws in the whole. And I didn't need to erase Sebastian from my history to move beyond him in my future. The complexity of this understanding felt like its own kind of freedom, the release from simplistic narratives of perfect love or complete betrayal into the more nuanced truth of human relationships with all their contradictions and complications. Daiwei. House sold faster than anyone expected. A cash offer above asking price from a tech executive relocating from California. The buyers requested an accelerated closing, eager to establish residence before the school year began. Within 6 weeks of listing, I found myself sitting across from Sebastian in our attorney's office, preparing to sign the final documents that would convert our shared home into divided assets. Sebastian arrived precisely on time, dressed in the charcoal suit he reserved for important client meetings. He had lost more weight since the library presentation, his wedding ring noticeably absent from his left hand. When our eyes met, I recognized the careful mask he wore, the professional composure that had once seemed like strength but now revealed itself as emotional barricading. "You look well," he offered as we waited for the attorneys to prepare the paperwork. "I am well," I replied, surprised to find this wasn't a polite fiction but a simple truth. "The department chair position is challenging in all the right ways." He nodded, a flash of genuine emotion, pride perhaps, or regret, breaking through his composed exterior. I always said you'd be brilliant at it. You did, I acknowledged, even while encouraging me to decline it last year. The observation wasn't delivered with bitterness, merely stated as fact. Sebastian flinched slightly nonetheless, the contradiction between his words and actions exposed in this small example of our larger dynamic. Our attorneys entered before he could respond, carrying folders of documents requiring signatures. We worked through them methodically: property transfer forms, asset division agreements, tax implications acknowledgments. The mechanical process of legally severing our connection proceeded with unexpected ease, the signatures accumulating page after page until we reached the final document. This completes the property settlement, Marina explained. Once filed, these transfers are irrevocable. Do you both understand and agree to these terms? I do, I said, the phrase that had once bound us together now serving to release us from each other. Yes, Sebastian agreed quietly. As the attorneys gathered the signed documents, an awkward silence descended. The liminal space between married and separated, between the life we had shared and the distinct futures awaiting us. In this suspended moment, I felt a sudden need to speak the truth that had been crystallizing since watching Sebastian's presentation. I want you to know something, I said, my voice low enough that only Sebastian could hear. I don't regret our marriage. He looked up sharply, surprise evident in his expression. You don't? No. It wasn't what I thought it was, and it couldn't continue after what happened. But I won't pretend those 8 years meant nothing, or brought me nothing of value. Sebastian's carefully maintained composure wavered, genuine emotion breaking through the professional veneer. I don't deserve your generosity. It's not generosity, I corrected. It's honesty. And something else I've realized. Your behavior wasn't about me. It never was. Your choices reflected your own internal struggles, not my worth or value. His eyes filled unexpectedly with tears, the first authentic vulnerability I had seen from him since our confrontation in Bali. I've started therapy, he said, his voice unsteady. Twice weekly, it's difficult, facing myself without compartmentalizing. Good, I said simply. That's important, for you, not for us. There is no more us. He nodded, accepting this finality without protest. Kara, Don't, I interrupted gently. Don't make promises about changing or becoming someone different. We both know restoration isn't possible, and I'm not looking for it anyway. I'm moving forward, Sebastian. I hope you find a way to do the same. The attorneys returned with copies of our signed documents, breaking the intensity of the moment. We completed the remaining formalities with professional courtesy, shaking hands with our respective legal representatives as the meeting concluded. Outside the building, standing on the sun-baked sidewalk of downtown Austin, Sebastian and I faced each other one final time, not as husband and wife, not as betrayer and betrayed, but simply as two people whose lives had been profoundly entwined and were now deliberately separated. I wish you well, Sebastian, I said, meaning it despite everything. I truly do. He studied my face, perhaps searching for the wounded woman who had confronted him in Bali. Instead, he found someone transformed, not healed completely, not untouched by pain, but fundamentally reconfigured by the journey through betrayal to self-reclamation. You're going to thrive, he said finally, a statement rather than a wish. You already are. Without embracing, without further declarations, we parted. Sebastian toward the parking garage to the north, me toward my recently purchased condominium several blocks south. The physical distance between us expanded with each step, mirroring the emotional separation that had begun months earlier in a luxury resort halfway around the world. Walking away, I realized that this, not the dramatic confrontation in Bali, not the revelations that followed, was the true resolution of our marriage. Not forgiveness exactly, but something equally powerful. The conscious release of anger, the acknowledgement of complex truth, and the freedom to carry forward only what served the life I was now creating for myself. 3 months after the house closing, my new life had begun taking recognizable shape. The condominium downtown, a modern one-bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Capitol, felt increasingly like home, decorated according to my preferences without compromise. The department chair position had fully engaged my professional focus, bringing challenges that stretched my abilities and rekindled academic passions long subordinated to maintaining our marriage. I had begun cautiously reconnecting with friends, accepting dinner invitations, and occasionally hosting small gatherings in my new space. These social reintegrations sometimes felt awkward, friends uncertain whether to mention Sebastian, conversations occasionally stalling when marital topics arose, but gradually a new normal emerged. I was no longer defined primarily as half of a couple, but recognized as myself. Kara, educator, department chair, woman rebuilding her life with intentionality and purpose. The divorce proceedings continued moving forward without complications. Sebastian had remained true to his word, contesting nothing, signing documents promptly, maintaining appropriate boundaries in our limited communications. Our lawyers handled most interactions, keeping our direct contact minimal, an arrangement that served us both. On a crisp October morning, I was reviewing curriculum proposals in my campus office when my assistant announced an unexpected visitor. Avery Williams. My initial instinct was refusal. What possible purpose could this meeting serve? The betrayal had been acknowledged. The marriage ended. The consequences allocated. Reopening communication with the woman who had participated in Sebastian's deception seemed unnecessarily painful. Yet curiosity prevailed. Perhaps it was the educator in me, always seeking complete understanding, or perhaps the emotional distance I had achieved made confrontation less threatening. Whatever the reason, I found myself nodding. Send her in. Avery entered hesitantly, noticeably different from the confident attorney I remembered. She wore a simple black dress that seemed deliberately understated, her typical statement jewelry absent. The woman who had once commanded attention in every room now seemed to be attempting invisibility. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, remaining, standing until I gestured toward the chair across from my desk. "I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I admitted. "Why are you here, Avery?" She placed a manila envelope on the desk between us. "There's something you should know, something I discovered after Bali." My stomach tightened at the mention of Bali, but I maintained my composure, waiting for her to continue. "Sebastian wasn't truthful with either of us," she said, her voice steadier now. "When you confronted us, when everything fell apart, I started looking more closely at our firm's finances, at the projects Sebastian had been managing, particularly Singapore." She tapped the envelope. "There are irregularities, Kara. Significant ones: money transfers to offshore accounts, project funds allocated to non-existent contractors. The Singapore client complaints weren't manufactured. They had legitimate concerns about financial mismanagement." I stared at her, processing this unexpected revelation. "Are you saying Sebastian was embezzling from the firm?" Avery nodded grimly. "I believe so. I've been building a case internally, quietly. The evidence suggests he's been diverting funds for at least 2 years, possibly longer." "Why tell me this?" I asked, genuinely perplexed. "We're divorced. His financial improprieties are no longer my concern." "Because some of those funds may have been commingled with your joint assets," she explained. "The house sale, investment, accounts. If any of that money was connected to these activities, you could potentially face legal exposure. I wanted to warn you, give you time to protect yourself." The irony was almost painful. Avery, who had participated in betraying me, personally, now acting to protect me professionally. I studied her face, searching for hidden motives or manipulations, but found only what appeared to be genuine concern. Why would you help me? I asked directly. After everything that happened? Avery's professional composure cracked slightly, revealing unexpected vulnerability. Because I owe you that much, at least. What happened between Sebastian and me? It wasn't what I thought either. He was manipulating both of us, Kara. Differently, but effectively. She hesitated, then continued with visible effort. After you found us in Bali, after you left, Sebastian revealed things, plans he had made, promises about our future that contradicted commitments he'd made to you. The man I thought I knew, he never existed. The parallel to my own realization was striking. Both of us deceived by Sebastian's compartmentalized personas, each shown only the version of himself that served his purposes. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Avery clarified. I don't deserve it. But I couldn't let you be blindsided again, potentially face legal consequences for actions you knew nothing about. I opened the envelope, scanning the documents inside. Financial records, transfer confirmations, email exchanges with subtle but unmistakable indications of deliberate misappropriation. The evidence appeared compelling, suggesting a level of calculation that exceeded even my revised understanding of Sebastian's character. Have you taken this to the authorities? I asked, closing the envelope. Not yet. I wanted to speak with you first, give you time to consult with your attorney about protecting your position. I nodded, acknowledging the unexpected consideration in this action. Thank you for bringing this to me. I'll have Marina review everything immediately. Avery stood to leave, then paused, seeming to wrestle with something more to say. Kara, I know it doesn't change anything between us, but I am truly sorry. Not just for Bali, but for the years of friendship I betrayed. I met her gaze directly. You're right, it doesn't change anything, but I appreciate the warning about this. I gestured to the envelope. It seems neither of us really knew him after all. After she left, I sat motionless behind my desk, absorbing this unexpected development. Sebastian's betrayal had been more comprehensive than I had imagined. Not just personal infidelity, but professional corruption. Not just emotional manipulation, but potentially criminal activity. I reached for my phone to call Marina, recognizing that the final chapter of my entanglement with Sebastian might not be the emotional resolution I had achieved, but rather legal proceedings that would further expose the elaborate deceptions upon which our shared life had been partially built. The investigation into Sebastian's financial improprieties unfolded over the following months, with the methodical precision of a well-conducted academic study. Marina connected me with a forensic accountant who painstakingly traced and isolated any potentially tainted assets, ensuring my financial independence from whatever consequences Sebastian might face. True to her word, Avery had provided the documentation to the firm's board and appropriate authorities shortly after our meeting. Sebastian was placed on administrative leave pending investigation, a development I learned about not through personal channels, but through an industry newsletter that arrived in my email, a small but significant indicator of how completely our lives had diverged. By early spring, the legal situation had clarified. I had no exposure to Sebastian's misdeeds, having been demonstrably unaware of the source of certain funds and having already divested from any commingled assets through our divorce settlement. Sebastian, however, faced serious professional sanctions and potential criminal charges. I felt strangely detached from these developments, interested as one might be in the conclusion of a complex case study rather than emotionally invested in the outcome. The Sebastian who had committed these acts was, in many ways, a stranger to me now, a man whose true nature I had glimpsed only after our marriage had ended. On a warm April evening, as the Texas wildflowers reached their peak bloom, I hosted a small dinner party in my condominium. The guests included colleagues from the psychology department, 2 neighbors from my building, and Rosie, whose relationship had evolved into genuine friendship during the house sale process. As we gathered around my dining table, a mid-century piece I had selected specifically for this new space, unburdened by marital associations. The conversation flowed, easily from academic topics to local politics to upcoming summer plans. I had recently been accepted to present at an educational psychology conference in Kyoto, the Japan trip I had long deferred now becoming reality. Midway through dessert, Rosie raised her glass in an impromptu toast. To Kara, who has shown us all what resilience truly looks like. The others joined enthusiastically, but I felt a momentary discomfort with being celebrated for simply surviving betrayal. As their glasses lowered, I offered my own perspective. "Thank you, but I don't see the past year as something I endured," I said, surprising myself with the clarity of this realization. It was something that revealed me to myself, showed me capabilities and strengths I hadn't fully recognized before. Looking around at these people who knew different facets of my story, some who had witnessed my marriage, others who had entered my life only after its dissolution, I felt a profound sense of integration. No longer compartmentalizing my experiences as Sebastian had done with his life, I had instead incorporated all aspects of my journey into a more complete understanding of myself. Later, after my guests had departed and I stood alone on my balcony, watching the city lights, I reflected on the transformation of the past year. The pain had not disappeared entirely. Grief for what I had believed my marriage to be still occasionally surfaced in quiet moments. But that grief no longer defined me or limited my forward movement. The woman who had flown to Bali seeking answers had found something more valuable than mere truth about her husband's betrayal. She had discovered her own capacity for resilience, for growth, for building a life designed not around another person's expectations, but around her own authentic values and aspirations. The story that had begun with devastating betrayal had evolved into something unexpected, not a tragedy of loss, but a narrative of reclamation, of self, of purpose, of possibility. Whatever the future held, I would meet it not as Sebastian's betrayed wife, but simply as myself, Kara, complete and continuing to evolve, carrying forward the wisdom hard-won through betrayal, but not defined by it. As the spring breeze carried, the scent of blooming trees from the Capitol grounds below, I smiled at the symmetry of new growth emerging from winter's necessary endings, nature's reminder that transformation often requires disruption, and that what follows can be more authentic, more vibrant, and more truly aligned with one's essential self than what came before. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.